My gateman knew my wife was sneaking out every night. He was paid to stay silent. My gateman watched my wife leave through that gate every single night for 6 months. He watched her fix her headscarf, adjust her wrapper, look left, look right, and disappear into the dark. And every single night he said nothing, not one word, because she was paying him to stay silent. But here is the part that will shake you. The reason she was sneaking out had nothing to do with what I thought, and when the truth finally came out, it destroyed everything I believed about my marriage, my family, and the man I trusted most in this world. If you've never subscribed to this channel, do it now, because this kind of story you don't want to miss even 1 second of. My name is Emeka. I am not a young man anymore. I am 51 years old, and I have lived long enough to know that the people who love you the most are sometimes the ones who hurt you the deepest, not because they want to, but because they are fighting battles they are too afraid to let you see. But let me start from the beginning, because this story did not begin with my wife sneaking out at night. It began much earlier. It began the day I hired Bellow. Bellow came to my compound in Lagos on a Wednesday morning in April. He was sent by my cousin Ugo, who said he was a trustworthy young man from Kogi State who needed work. He was 24 years old, thin as a sugarcane stalk, with quiet eyes and a voice so soft you had to lean in to hear him. He did not beg, he did not oversell himself. He simply stood at my gate, cap in hand, and said, "Oga, I will not disappoint you." I liked that about him. Not the promise. Men make promises every day. I liked the way he said it, like he meant it in his bones. So I hired him as my gateman. My wife, Ada, met him that same evening when she came outside to check on the compound. She looked at him for a moment, nodded once, and went back inside. She did not say much about him. Ada was like that. She observed people quietly, formed her opinions privately, and only spoke when she had something worth saying. We had been married 23 years at that point. We had 3 children, our firstborn son Chidi, who was in university in Enugu, our daughter Ngozi, who was 18 and preparing for her JAMB, and our last, Tobena, who spent most of his time either eating or sleeping. A normal family, a full house. I was a building contractor. Business was not always smooth, but we were comfortable. We had a 4-bedroom house in Surulere, a gatehouse for the help, 2 cars, and enough peace to be grateful. I traveled often for work, sometimes to Abuja, sometimes to Port Harcourt, sometimes as far as Kaduna for projects. When I was away, Ada ran everything. The children, the house, the bills, the decisions. She was not just my wife. She was the spine of that family. I want you to understand something clearly before I continue. Ada was not a troublesome woman. She was not flirtatious. She was not the type to be looking for attention from other men. In 23 years of marriage, I had never once had a reason to doubt her character. Not once. She was the kind of woman other men envied me for. Not because she was flashy or loud, but because she was solid. She was real. She was mine. So when things started changing, I did not notice at first because the changes were small, subtle, the kind that hide inside ordinary life until one day you turn around and realize that what you thought was your life has been quietly rearranging itself without your permission. It started with the sleep, or rather the lack of it. I'm a man who sleeps deeply. I always have been. But sometime around October of that year, I started waking up in the middle of the night for no reason. Not because of noise, not because of anything I could point to. I would just wake up at 2:30 in the morning and reach across the bed and Ada would not be there. The first time I assumed she went to use the bathroom. I fell asleep before she returned, so I didn't think much of it. The second time, I waited a few minutes and she came back, got into bed and said nothing. I asked where she went and she said she could not sleep and went to get water. I accepted that. The third time, I got up. I walked through the corridor quietly. The kitchen was dark, the sitting room was dark, the children's rooms were closed and quiet. I went to the back door, locked. I went to the front door and something made me pause. The lock was not fully turned. It was the way Ada sometimes left it when she went to sit on the front veranda in the evening to cool off. But it was 2:15 in the morning. I opened the door slowly. She was not on the veranda. I stood outside into the compound air and I saw the gate, Bellow's gate, slightly ajar, just slightly, not enough for anyone to notice unless they were looking, but I was looking. I stood there in the dark for a long time, long enough for the night insect to go quiet around me, long enough for my heart to start doing things I didn't want it to do. And then I heard the gate creak again, and Ada walked back into the compound. She did not see me first. She was adjusting her wrapper, looking down at her feet. When she looked up and found me standing in the dark, she froze. We stared at each other for what felt like a full minute. Then she said, "Emeka, go back inside. I will explain." And something in her voice, not guilt, but something closer to exhaustion, to weight, made me walk back inside without saying a single word. Because in 23 years, I had learned to hear the difference between the voice of a woman hiding something dirty and the voice of a woman carrying something heavy. But I could not yet tell which one this was.
Inside, she sat across from me at the dining table, and she said she had been having trouble sleeping, and sometimes she walked around the neighborhood at night because it helped her breathe. She said she did not want to worry me. She said Bellow always stayed awake when she went out and watched the road until she came back. I asked her why she did not just tell me. She said she knew I would make it into something bigger than it was. She said she just needed air sometimes. I looked at her for a long time. And God forgive me, I believed her because it made a certain kind of sense. Ada had always been a private person with her struggles. She internalized things. She did not like to burden people. And I had been traveling more than usual that year, leaving her alone with Tobena and Ngozi and the full weight of the house. Maybe she was just tired in a way I had not been paying attention to. I told her she should have told me. She nodded. She said she would. And we went to bed. But I did not sleep. Because something was still bothering me. Not what she said, but what she did not say. Because Ada, when she is telling the whole truth, she looks at you directly. She holds your gaze. That night, when she told me about the walks, she kept looking at her hands. I did not confront her again. Not yet. Instead, I watched. I'm not proud of what came next. A man who truly trusts his wife does not do what I did, but I was not at full trust anymore. Not because I believed she was doing something wrong, but because I believed she was hiding something. And in a marriage, hidden things grow. They grow in the dark like mold, and by the time you see them, they have already spread through the walls. I started sleeping lighter. I would lie still in the dark and wait. And sure enough, about 3 nights out of 7, I would feel the mattress shift, hear her feet on the floor, hear the soft click of the front door, and then silence. I timed her once. She was gone for 1 hour and 40 minutes. Another time, 45 minutes. Another time, just over 2 hours. On the 4th time I tracked her, I decided I was going to follow her. I dressed quickly and quietly, and I got to the gatehouse before she came back. I asked Bellow, who was standing there at his post at 2:30 in the morning like it was the most normal thing in the world, where she went. Bellow looked at me, and I will never forget the expression on his face. It was not the face of a guilty man. It was not the face of a man caught in something shameful. It was the face of a man in the middle of something he had no good way out of, like he was standing at a crossroads and both roads led somewhere painful. He said, "Oga, I am sorry. I cannot tell you." I stared at him. He said it again. "I cannot tell you." I asked him if my wife was paying him to keep quiet. He said nothing, which was its own kind of answer. I felt something cold move through my chest then. Not just anger, though there was anger, something colder. Because this young man I had trusted, this man I had given work and shelter and food and a wage, he was standing in front of me, my employee, in my compound, at my gate, and he was telling me he could not tell me where my own wife was going in the night. I sent him to the gatehouse. I told him we would talk in the morning, and I stood alone in my compound in the dark and tried to hold myself together. Ada came back 20 minutes later. When she saw me at the gate, she stopped walking. Then she walked past me without a word and went straight inside. I followed her. That night, the conversation was different. I was not calm anymore. I told her I knew she was paying Bellow to stay quiet. I told her I had been watching for weeks. I told her she needed to tell me the truth right now or I was going to make decisions that she would not like. She sat on the bed and she looked at me, this time directly, no looking at her hands. And she said, Emeka, I need you to trust me for 2 more weeks, just 2 more weeks, and then I will tell you everything. 2 more weeks. I almost laughed. I asked her what kind of man she took me of. I asked her if she understood what she was asking me to live with. She reached out and held my hand, and her hand was shaking, and she said, I am not doing anything to shame you. I swear on our children's lives. Please trust me. I want to tell you right now, if you are watching this and you have ever been asked to trust someone who was clearly hiding something from you, you know exactly what I was feeling in that moment. Because it's not just anger, it's grief. It's the slow, nauseating feeling that the person you know best in the world might be a stranger in some way you haven't discovered yet. I told her I would give her 1 week, not 2, 1. She nodded, and she held my hand in the dark until I fell asleep. Now, before I tell you what happened next, I need to tell you about something that was happening on a completely different front, something I had no idea was connected to any of this, something that, when it finally came together, changed everything I thought I understood about my family. My older brother Nkena had been sick. Not slightly sick, seriously sick. He had been diagnosed with a kidney condition 2 years earlier, and his health had been declining slowly but steadily. He lived in Ikoruko, on the other side of Lagos, with his wife and his 4 children. Nkena and I had a complicated relationship. We were not close in the easy, casual way that some brothers are. We were close in the way that men who grew up in a difficult household are close, with deep loyalty, some old wounds, and a lot of things that never got said. Ada had always liked Nkena. She got along with him better than I did, honestly. She would sometimes visit him when I was away, bring him food, sit with him. I knew this. I approved of it. It seemed like the decent thing to do. But what I did not know, what I had no idea about, was that Nkena's condition had gotten dramatically worse in the past 3 months. What I did not know was that his doctor had told him he needed a specific treatment that cost a significant amount of money. What I did not know was that Nkena, proud man that he was, had refused to tell me. And what I absolutely did not know was that Ada had found out about it herself. Not from me, not from Ikena, but from Ikena's wife, Chinyere, who had called Ada in tears one evening while I was in Abuja. Now, here is where this story turns in a way that I still struggle to fully explain. Because when I finally learned the truth, I had to sit with a complicated mixture of feelings that did not fit neatly into any one box. Ada had decided on her own, without telling me, that she was going to help pay for Ikena's treatment. And she had decided to do it secretly because she knew that if she told me, I would either insist on handling it myself or I would confront Ikena directly, and Ikena would refuse the help out of pride, and the whole thing would collapse into a family argument while my brother slowly died. She was not wrong about any of that. That is exactly what would have happened. So Ada had been quietly liquidating some of her own savings, money she had put away over many years from her catering business, money I did not know the full extent of because Ada was disciplined about her finances in a way I respected but never fully investigated. She had been making payments in cash late at night through a woman in Ikeja who was managing the medical bills on Ikena's behalf, a woman named Madam Chioma, who worked informally as a kind of financial broker for families dealing with medical emergencies. The night visits were to Madam Chioma's house. Not every night, but 3-4 times a week, Ada would walk to the junction 3 streets away, where Madam Chioma's driver would pick her up, take her to the house in Ikeja,
She would make her payment or receive a receipt or discuss the treatment progress, and then the driver would drop her back at the junction and she would walk home. Bellow knew because Bellow was the one who had helped her the very first time when her own car was in the mechanic and she did not want to call a taxi at that hour. He had flagged down a keke for her. And when she came back and he saw the relief on her face, she had told him a small part of what she was doing, just enough to explain why she needed his discretion. And she had been paying him a little extra to keep the gate situation clean. He did not know the full story either. He only knew that his madam was going somewhere to help someone and she needed quiet. This was what came out, not in one clean conversation, but in pieces over the week that followed my ultimatum. It did not all come out at once. The first thing that came out was that it involved the Kena. Ada told me that much the next day after I had spent a sleepless night building increasingly dark theories in my head. She said, "It is about your brother. That is all I can say right now without breaking a promise I made." That stopped me cold. I called Ikena that same morning. He did not pick up. I called his wife Chinyere. She was evasive. She said he was resting. I said I would come over on Saturday. She said that would be fine. I went over on Saturday. What I found there, my brother, thinner than I had ever seen him, sitting in a chair by the window with a blanket over his legs in the middle of the day, looking out at the street with the hollow eyes of a man who has been quietly making peace with things, I cannot fully describe to you, because I had not seen him in 4 months. 4 months. And in 4 months, my big brother, this man who used to carry me on his back when we were children, who used to shout louder than anyone at football matches, who had the laugh that could clear a room, he had become something fragile and quiet. I sat next to him for a long time without saying anything. Then I asked him why he did not tell me. He looked at me and he said, "You have your own load, Emeka." That sentence broke something in me, because it was such a him thing to say. My brother who never wanted to add to anyone's weight, my brother who would rather sit quietly with his own pain than ask the people who loved him to share it. I took his hand, and I held it like Ada had held mine in the dark the other night, and neither of us said anything for a while. Later, Chinyere told me everything. How the bills had been accumulating, how Ikana had refused to tell me because he did not want to embarrass himself or feel like a burden, how Ada had found out and immediately started moving money, how Ada had made Chinyere promise not to say anything to me because she knew exactly how I would react and she wanted to protect Ikena's dignity while still getting him the help he needed. I drove home in silence. I sat in my car outside my gate for 20 minutes. Bellow came out and saw me sitting there, and he just stood quietly at the gate, not asking anything, just present. I rolled down the window eventually, and I said to him, "You knew this whole time." He said, "Yes, Oga." I said, "Why didn't you just tell me?" And he said, "Because Madame asked me not to, and because she was not doing anything wrong." I sat with that for a moment. Then I nodded and drove inside. Ada was in the kitchen. I stood in the doorway and watched her for a moment. She was chopping tomatoes, her back to me, and she was humming something low and soft to herself. Just living, just being Ada. I said her name. She turned around. She read my face immediately. She always could. And whatever she saw there made her put down the knife and wipe her hands on her apron. I said, "I went to see Ikena." Her face went through several things at once. Relief, worry, uncertainty about what was coming next. I said, "How much have you spent?" She was quiet for a moment. Then she told me. The number was significant. Not ruinous, but significant. Money she had saved carefully over a long time from her own work. Money that was hers in every real sense of the word. And she had been spending it on my brother in the dark because she loved this family more than she loved the simplicity of her own life. I asked her, "Why didn't you tell me? We are supposed to be partners." She said, "Because you would have fought with him. You know how Ikena is. You would have gone over there, confronted him, told him you were handling it, and he would have refused the help and pushed you away. And then where would we be? I know you. I know you." I wanted to argue with her. I wanted to say she was wrong, but the truth was ringing too loudly in my ears because she was not wrong.
That is exactly what I would have done. I would have marched over there like a soldier and turned a delicate situation into a battlefield. And so instead, I asked her the question that had been living under all the others since that first night I found her at the gate. I said, "Did you not trust me enough to try?" That was the real question. Not about the money, not about Ikenna, about us. About what 23 years of marriage meant if she still felt she had to protect me from my own reactions. About what it meant if the woman who knew me best in the world did not believe I was capable of doing the right thing quietly. Ada looked at me for a long time. Then she said, "I trust you with everything that matters, Emeta. I trust you with my life, with our children, with my heart. But this needed a soft touch, and soft is not always your gift." That hurt, the way honest things hurt, because they find the exact place in you that is true, and they press on it without mercy. I did not respond right away. I walked to the dining table and sat down. She came and sat across from me, the same way we had sat that first night. And this time, I was the one who was quiet, and she was the one waiting. I thought about my brother sitting in that chair by the window. I thought about the months of nights Ada had been walking to that junction and back in the dark to make sure he did not die without someone fighting for him. I thought about Bellow, that quiet young man standing at the gate every night, watching the road, waiting for his madam to come back safe. I thought about all the love that had been moving through the story in directions I could not see, and how I had been in the middle of it, building a dark narrative around something that was made entirely of devotion. I said, "From now on, we do this together." She said, "Yes." I said, "All of it, whatever it is, we do it together." She nodded. Her eyes were wet. I reached across the table and took her hand. Now, I want to pause here, because I know some of you are watching and thinking the story is over. The wife was innocent, the gateman was loyal, the husband was suspicious for nothing, everybody hug and go home. But there is a piece of this story I have not told you yet. A piece that did not come out until 3 weeks later. A piece that changes the shape of everything. Remember, subscribe if you haven't, because what comes next is the part that turned my understanding of this entire thing upside down. Bellow came to me on a Sunday morning, cap in hand, the same way he had arrived at my gate the first time. He said he needed to talk to me. I sat with him on the veranda and he spoke quietly and carefully, the way he always did. He told me that the reason he had agreed to keep Ada's secret, beyond the money, beyond her instructions, was because he had been in a situation like Ikenna's once before. His own father, back in Kogi, had been sick and too proud to ask for help, and there had been no Ada in their family. There had been no one willing to walk through the night to arrange payments and manage the quiet details of keeping someone alive. His father had died while the family was still arguing about how to handle it. He was 18 years old when it happened. He said, "When Madame told me what she was doing, I did not need to think about whether to help her. I already knew." I sat with that for a long time. Then I asked him something I had been carrying since that night at the gate. I said, "When I asked you where she was and you refused to tell me, were you afraid?" He said, "Yes, Oga, very afraid." I said, "But you still refused." He said, "Yes." I asked him why. He thought about it for a moment, and then he said, "Because she was not doing anything that needed your protection. She was the one doing the protecting. And I thought, if I tell you, you stop her. If I stop her, your brother dies. So I had to choose between my fear and the right thing." I do not have the words to fully describe what I felt sitting there with this 24-year-old gateman who, in his quiet way, had been holding a piece of my family together while I slept. This young man from Kogi, with the soft voice and the heavy past, who had made a decision in a split second that required more wisdom than many twice his age ever managed to find. I told him I was not going to fire him. He looked surprised,
which told me he had been prepared for that possibility. He had come to tell me the truth, knowing it might cost him his job. He had come anyway. I told him I was giving him a raise instead. He looked even more surprised. I told him I was also going to sponsor him to take the building technology certification course he had mentioned once, months ago, in passing, when I had asked him what he wanted to do with his life. He had mentioned it once and never brought it up again. The way people mention their dreams when they don't really expect anyone to take them seriously. He stared at me. Then he looked down at his cap in his hands. And this young man, this tough, quiet, controlled young man, started to cry. Not loud, not dramatic, just silent tears moving down his face while he looked at his cap. And I sat there with him, and I did not say anything, because some moments don't need words. Ikenna completed his treatment 9 months later. It was not easy. There were setbacks, there were nights when Chinyere called, and I could hear the fear in Ada's voice as she paced the corridor talking into the phone. But he completed it. He's not fully recovered. His kidneys will always carry the damage. But he's alive. He's sitting in his chair by the window. He's watching his children grow up. He came to our house for Christmas that year, and we sat at the table together. Ikenna and Chinyere and their children, and me and Ada and ours, and even Bellow, because Ada had insisted on setting a plate for him since he had nowhere to go for the holiday, and Tobena had immediately claimed him a football partner for the day. And I looked around that table and I thought about all the things I almost destroyed by not being patient enough, by deciding I knew what a hidden thing meant before I had found out what was actually hidden. Because that's the thing about secrets in a marriage, and this is important, so stay with me. Not every secret is a betrayal. Some secrets are acts of the love so careful, so considered, so specific to the person they are protecting, that if you drag them into the light before they are ready, you don't reveal something ugly, you destroy something beautiful.
Ada knew me well enough to know that the knowledge would have made me heavy, that I would have gone to Ikenna heavy, and heaviness would have made him close up. She carried it light so that it could move through the right channels. She walked in the dark so that the light could stay on for my brother. I was angry at first that she did not believe I could handle it. But sitting at that Christmas table, watching my brother eat jollof rice and tease Tobena about his haircut and laugh, that old loud laugh coming back, thinner than it used to be but still unmistakably his, I let go of the anger because the outcome was good. My brother was alive, my marriage was intact, my Gateman had become something between an employee and a son to us, and I had learned something about myself that I could not have learned any other way. I had learned that love does not always announce itself. It does not always come through the front gate in the daylight. Sometimes it moves through the dark at 2 a.m, adjusting its headscarf, checking left, checking right, and disappearing into the night without explanation because the explanation would ruin everything. I asked Ada once, after all of it was done, what she would have done if I had forced the truth out of her before she was ready to tell it, before Ikenna's treatment was far enough along that my involvement could not have derailed it. She thought about it seriously, the way she thought about serious things. Then she said, I would have told you, and then I would have driven to Ikorodu myself the same day before you got there, and I would have talked to Ikenna first. I had a plan, Emeka. I always have a plan. I laughed. For the first time in all of this, I genuinely laughed because that was the most Ada thing she had ever said to me. This woman, my wife of 23 years, this woman who ran our house like a quiet general, who planned 3 moves ahead of every situation, who walked through the dark carrying other people's lives in her hands, she already had a contingency. She looked at me when I laughed, and she smiled and she said, you see, you never needed to worry. And I thought, yes and no, because worry is what love looks like when it does not have enough information, and information is what trust is supposed to fill in. We had work to do on the trust. We both knew it.
I needed to become easier to come to with hard things. She needed to believe I could be steady even when the thing was fragile. That is the kind of marriage work that does not end, it just deepens. Bellow passed his certification exam the following year. He is no longer my gateman. He works now for a construction firm in Abuja, sends money home to his mother in Kogi, and calls Ada on her birthday every year without fail. He calls me on mine too, usually a day late because he is a little scattered about dates, but he calls. He came back once, about 2 years after he left, just to visit. Tobena, who was 15 by then and had become obsessed with architecture, sat with him for 3 hours asking questions about building structures and load-bearing walls. Ada made pepper soup. Ikenna, who was come to Lagos for a checkup, joined us for dinner that evening, and at some point, he and Bellow ended up in the corner of the sitting room talking quietly about something. I never found out what, but I looked over at them once, my older brother and this young man who had helped keep him alive, without either of them fully knowing the other existed, and there was something about that image that I will carry for the rest of my life. The gateman who was paid to stay silent, the wife who walked through the dark, the brother who was too proud to ask for help, the husband who almost saw betrayal where there was only love, and the money that moved quietly from hand to hand in the middle of the night, keeping a man's kidneys functioning, keeping a family together, keeping the story going. If there's a lesson in all of this, I will not pretend it is a simple one. Life does not deal in simple lessons. But if I had to say something, I would say this. The next time the person you love is keeping something from you, before you build your case, before you construct your narrative, before you decide what the hidden thing means, ask yourself this one question. Who do I think this person is? Not who they're acting like in this confusing moment, but who do I actually know them to be, in their bones, in their history, in the 1,000 small choices you have witnessed over years of real life together. Because sometimes the answer to that question is the only investigation you need. Ada was Ada. I knew who she was. I just forgot to remember it when I needed to most. If this story reached something in you, if it made you think about the people in your life who love you in quiet, inconvenient, complicated ways, share it with someone. And if you haven't subscribed to this channel yet, do it now, not because we ask, but because the stories we tell here are the ones that matter, the ones about ordinary people carrying extraordinary love in directions nobody expects. We put one out every week, and every single one will leave you with something real. Stay well, take care of the people who love you, and remember, sometimes the most loyal person in your life is standing quietly at the gate in the dark, saying nothing, because everything they know points in the direction of good.